Życzymy Państwu przyjemnej podróży.
To już chyba czas, żeby zacząć. Dobry
I think it's time to start. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us here, and I'd like to thank our viewers online. I'd like to welcome you, of course, to the Freedom Games and the debate about resilient society. I will introduce our guests. I even joked that if we had a congress of convention on of the Conservative Party, we would have one leader and no women. I'd like to welcome you once again. I'd like to thank our guests because they are very busy women. But I like to say that in education, I don't represent education, but in pedagogy there is something like reflexive practitioner. So you are female reflective practitioners, and our guests have been active for many years. They've been active. They've been NGO activists in the field of education, research, academia, and we are meeting here at the Freedom Games, where we discuss meta subjects, but we also try to translate meta into everyday operations. So I'd like to say that you are in the best place and you are the best guests that I could dream of. And I haven't introduced you yet, but everybody knows you. But Agata Wojda, the mayor of Kielce, who has come to Łódź. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. We have Maria Ejchart, the Vice Minister of Justice, but I'm sure you know her as one of the founders of Wolne Sądy, Free Courts or Free Justice organization. Dorota Łoboda, a member of parliament, and who is a president of one of the committees, that is the abortion committee, and an education expert. For many years very active in the local authorities in Warsaw and very strongly supporting the educational movements, which I'm sure you could also observe starting as of the strike in 2018, where Dorota was already resilient society is a very important subject, but everybody understands it differently. I will ask our experts, guests, and politicians, women responsible for the policy, for different policies of our country. Dorota is also a spokesperson of the civic coalition club at the Polish Parliament. I'd like to tell you about three aspects that to me seem critically important, and that and we've been discussing them for a long time. Well, we are living in the times of deep crisis or trust crisis. Our trust index is minus 80%, meaning 80% of us don't trust others, and we not only other people but also public institutions. Well, this trust has always been low, but right now it's really, really extremely low, and this is one of the aspects that has to be taken into account when we are speak about our society. Disinformation or misinformation has been on popping up over and over again since the beginning of the war in Ukraine. I hope I will give the floor to our guests soon, but I have to tell you that as by way of introduction, because the scale of disinformation, you were in the opposition recently, but we were an exceptional country because one of a very renowned American think tanks, when it analyzed this information in Polish social media, came to the conclusion, which is quite unique for this region, because this information was targeting the opposition. So, and that was very unique, because normally it targets the governing parties. But if we speak about social resilience, and we have the crisis of trust, democracy crisis, 90%, well, many people, quite a big proportion of people live in countries that are seen as democratic, but 30% have views that are authoritarian. So, and that also impacts our feeling of safety and security. So what is this resilience about? Because these phenomena have been with us on an everyday basis. It means that this resilience doesn't work. So I'd like to ask you, and I promise I will not be talking more, Maria, what is social resilience? I hope that I would be adding on to what my co-panelists have said. Oh, well, I have some notes because I always prepare when I am to take part in something important, and this panel is very important. So I read about resilience, eco-resilience, resilience of groups, communities, and this is an ability to cope with crisis situation. Well, first to be prepared to a crisis and then to cope with it. And this definition, this idea of resilience, was coined in the 1970s, and it addressed ecosystems. At that time, we didn't think that the societies will not be resilient. And this is a good comparison, and this provides a good background, because if we think about a forest after fire, or an earthquake, or a meadow that is recovering after a natural disaster, that can be translated to the social field, which is much more complex, because in the social context we have institutions and we have law. And these are the contexts which give this uniqueness to this concept of social resilience. Without these two contexts, there is no social resilience. So I knew whom this question should go to first. You are excellently prepared. And from the point of view of the Parliament, Dorota, social resilience, you are a spokesperson of the club of one of the parties. You are also an activist, active in education, and a member of a committee of committees which deal with very controversial issues and where manipulation is very easy. So how I understand resilience, well, I understand resilience as giving tools to society that will make it strong, democratic, resistant to disinformation. From my perspective, this is especially important at the educational level. Because these, when I speak of these tools, I see them in the context of education, because that's what we've always been missing. And I don't want to say that that was the case of the previous government, because in fact we have never had a good civic education. And there are new tools that disseminate disinformation, the internet, social media, and the vulnerability of our children vis-a-vis these media, because the only idea in the social sphere was to restrict access to iPhones or to mobile phones, as if that could solve all our problems. So not necessarily from the perspective of the parliament, but also from the perspective of the Ministry of Education. We should ensure media education. We should provide young people with media education, to give them tools that will allow them to to differentiate between information and fake news, that will give them tools, making them resilient to hatred and hatred in the network, in the internet. That's really the key. This media education should be there, and I hope that it will be there. Well, from the point of view of the spokesperson, is the explanation, or telling people what is not true, giving sources of information, explaining people what news are fake news, and where they can find the truth. Well, these are the main elements. So parliament, government, and human rights, and now the local authorities.
No, odporności społecznej.
So, to what extent this crisis of resilience and social crisis is felt at the local government level, as you meet residents, as you meet local inhabitants? Do you talk about it among members of local authorities? Well, indeed, we have problems with a good organization of resilience. In this panel, we kind of continue previous panel that took place several hours ago about resilient state. So I'm very happy that it's females that are on this panel. In the panel on state resilience, mostly men had an opportunity to voice their opinions, with only one lady. And that panel was above ground, and we were placed underground. But fortunately, the chairs are quite comfortable. Okay, well, Witold Rosa, member of that state debate, is here. Well, speaking seriously, actually, quite a lot of important things were said during the previous panel. I haven't prepared in terms of definition, but I have my intuitions and practice. What resilience is about is the ability to organize easily in a time of crisis, and the ability to spread reliable information as fast as possible. And the barrier to such behaviors is a crisis of confidence or trust. It is a Polish problem. I think we had a very difficult time during the communist times where society didn't trust the authorities, and after that we entered a period of economic political transformation, and a lot of people felt socially and economically excluded, and they were kind of they begrudged those who were successful, and right now again the crisis is deepening for two reasons. First of all, politicians are not very and do not enjoy social trust, and for many that is due to 8 years of a very let's say untrustworthy government, and as a result many former members of parliament are now shortening their last names to one letter with a dot, and finally a lot of people use very superficial knowledge and do not look for expert opinions. So today we have a kind of a race against time, who can reach people with information faster. So this is a testing time for the local authorities at the time of COVID. Now I saw that a lot of internet users surrounded members of the local authorities, and at a time of crisis people try to seek for information even if somebody has partial information. Somebody is trustworthy, even if somebody can say, okay, we don't know, we are trying to find out. This also builds credibility if you don't pretend to have a monopoly on knowledge. I think that this any abuse of reliability leads to a situation where we lose credibility. Now, there are many opportunities and act on civil defense. So, for example, if you hear an alarm siren in your neighborhood, what is your first reaction? Now, the first thing that comes to my mind is check the calendar to see whether perhaps there is some national holiday. We need to go back to the basics and provide some communication tools. Perhaps we can still talk about it today, but it's a whole range of tools. If we want to use them from the standpoint of local governments, we need to ensure credibility and have good communication channels. Okay, may I? Yes, please do. Great, thank you. I'd like to speak to what Agata said about history, and again, I'd like the audience to go back to last year, the elections, and 75% attendance, because as a society that has common roots going back to ecosystem narrative, maybe some different roots, but there must be some roots as a gesture of protest against authoritarian rule. We went to the polls, and the resiliency test was passed with flying colors. Wonderful time. I think we'll always have it in our hearts. And now it's a year later, and this is a question to ourselves. Over the past years, being at different levels of power, authorities, different places, have we been able to strengthen that resiliency, or just the opposite? I think the level of social frustration, the frustration of people committed to a variety of social activities is very high, and the level of trust is low. I'd like to ask this question right now. I'd like to ask you about this paradox. I think that the democracies tend to try and understand paradoxes because reality is extremely complex. Now, do you think that we as society are ready to understand paradoxes? I thought that I wouldn't need to ask this question, but again, the question of the death penalty is coming back. If we hear such postulates of directed by former authorities, can we really talk about paradoxes when we hear about this postulate with the political campaign? Professor Rzepliński 30 years ago said that whenever death penalty is raised in the panel, he leaves. Well, death penalty will always crop up, will continue to keep cropping up in the future. It's an ocean, it's like a dolphin that goes under the water and resurfaces. The death penalty will always have its supporters. I don't think it's the best example because it's not tested in different situations. So what would a good example be? Something that is most disappointing. I think that what we haven't been able to provide to this resilient society for the past year is a sense of agency and the ability to participate in decisions. Okay, so we've done something great together, but now they have ceded responsibility, and now I'm trying to do this as much as possible. So introduce social co-agency, co-responsibility in what I do at the Ministry of Justice, and I realize it's extremely difficult because the office is not ready for that in any way. Even at the technical and organizational levels, the office doesn't, the ministry doesn't want to accept so many guests that I invite. It's a big problem that the guests are arriving. There are no places for them to sit down. It's you know, coffee must be served to them. Also, I believe that we do not have a formal venue in terms of policy making to invite social participation, expert participation. And, I think that officials are not prepared for that. We are in office and we know how matters should be resolved, but this is one of the more difficult things for me. And one of the changes that I introduced at the organizational level is that, okay, there are groups and teams. You do not have to name the teams. You don't need to provide rules for them or rule books. It's worthwhile to get advice from others. And also part of the ministry is located at the Aleja Róż Street, and so it's not like you need to leave the building, go somewhere else. I know that this is pretty banal, we've heard about it many years, but in practice, that is the essence of our responsibility on this side. Yes, I'd like to go back to this topic of institutions. Now, the subject of the death penalty always crops up. It's not a good topic. How about abortion? Because the argument of democratic circles is a referendum, or should we have a referendum or not about abortion? It's very hotly debated, even in the ruling majority. It's controversial. And then as a PR person, you need to explain that. Okay, let me finish this introduction, but also across Europe, it is a very politically loaded subject across Europe, also used by Russia. Okay, Dorothy, it's over to you. Yes, indeed, the debate, highly polarized debate around abortion in terms of a referendum. As a speaker, I'm in a good situation that we do not support referendum. It is a paradox. Yes, perhaps this is it. Because on the one hand, we want civic society to have influence over decisions, but a referendum on abortion would be a very bad implementation of this postulate. But indeed, we have this. Let people decide. Yes, on the 15th of October last year, they decided 75% who voted chose the people responsible for change of abortion law. So the referendum would make no sense and would open the gates of hell. That's a devil's advocate. Okay, we have won, we are ruling, we don't need a referendum. Okay, so this is a natural social voice that we should have, but not in every case, not in the case of human rights. Not okay. There are a lot of arguments against a referendum. The most important thing is that we cannot vote on human rights. Then it doesn't change the legal situation. The result of a referendum will not change the law. We will still need to create a law that will go through a legislative process, and the members of parliament will need to legislate it. So it's not like in Ireland where they had to hold a referendum because of a different legal system, and any other change was impossible. Okay, legally it is possible, and I hope it will take place. And we already know what the debate would look like, and what we know about fake news and disinformation and debate that would turn our country into hell. We would have vans with torn fetuses. We would have our accounts flooded with materials. We saw that in a sample of that during a public hearing. So I think there is a paradox, because on the one hand, we would like public voice to be heard, but not like this. Yes, it is a very good point, because our institutions, whether it is Ministry of Justice or Parliament, which is an institution itself, a legislative process, so we need to ration for example, referendum in this respect, because we are not ready to open this subject for a referendum because we do not have resilient institutions. Because if we were exposed to extreme emotions, let's say these dead fetuses and so on and so forth, and they would be supported not only by national institutions but other countries. No, civic society, no. I would like our audience to be able to ask questions. So now I'd like to address the question, what should we do? Or do you know what we should do to make sure that institutions create space for social resilience?
Two sentences. I recently spoke to the ambassador of Australia, and he told me that 20 years ago, when they were introducing partnership relationships, that some people still heal the wounds of after what they heard, what was told when the discussion on this act was taking place. It was 20 years ago. Social media were not so developed, and still these people remember how terrible this referendum campaign was for them. So it seems that with the knowledge that we have today, the referendum on abortion would finish the subject, put an end to this discussion, but we can't control how many external influences would appear. I'm sorry, but of course abortion is an example of how our institutions are not prepared. No, this is not the question of our institutions not being ready, but this is just, well, because we have the crisis of institutions in Poland, then look at the United States and how the elections take place and how the campaign, what the campaign looks like. I don't think that any institution in any country is resilient enough to be protected against external influences who are very unfair. I don't think that abortion is a polarizing subject. I think that we can see black and white what abortion, what was the place of abortion in voting of the 15th of October last year. We know how many supporters, and we know that it is a vast majority of those who elected the members of the present government. The vast majority support abortion. So this is not a problem of the voters, but it is support. It's a problem of the this governing of the ruling coalition, because the leaders who hold power today, they were saying that it was not an ideological or political issue, that it was a civilizational issue. While today we are opening this Pandora box again, and we are telling them that this is a political postulate, and this is the test for credibility. And I'm very much afraid that this crisis of trust may have far-reaching consequences. Well, we heard yesterday that there is a draft law on partnership, on partner relationships. Of course, everybody would say it's too late or too long. It has taken too long, but not dealing with abortion may have very far-reaching political consequences, which we can imagine, but we can't speak about them. Oh, well, this was the applause for you, but I'd like to ask you about the institutions, Maria. You mentioned institutions. You said that it's easier said than done, because in practice it's really very difficult to make an institution, a ministry, to get involved in a dialogue. Well, you told us you know how to develop resilience through the use of institutions within which you operate today. Well, at the local level, at the central level. Well, without institutions, it's hard to imagine rebuilding trust. I think that this positive trust, Professor Stompka also said that it has to be built top down, from the institution to an individual. We can't wait for the society to build trust for themselves. Well, and our institutions were damaged in recent years, and we have to rebuild trust and rebuild these institutions. Well, I think that it should be done in parallel. It's not that this is the first step and this is the next step, because these are processes that are endless. Like the universe will be flying further and further and building. So everything should be done in parallel. Well, and secondly, we are operating in conditions of permanent crisis. It's not that the flood has strengthened us. We've been living for many years in a permanent crisis. It was said at one of the panels in the morning, there was the COVID-19 pandemic, war in Ukraine, flood. None of these crisis situations has been stopped or has ceased. One more thesis to what Agata said, I'd like to add it, because I think that the measure of trust and the measure of how well we are coping with the crisis in which we are will be our ability to rebuild trust in the judiciary, which plays two functions. Well, on the one hand, it's substantive law. It's the well, for us to know that we have judges in the court. Until we are not sure that people in courts are judges, then we will not have trust in any other institution, because we don't have real courts. Those well, right now we don't know who. We don't know who is a judge, who is new judge, should this or that be recognized. So we are after many years of very complex narrative about the system of justice. And this is a much greater problem than the destruction, that it goes far beyond the destruction of the judiciary in Poland, because there is this procedural aspect that is going to the court and putting the decisions to the test. Well, I go to the court and I want to learn whether the local municipalities spend my money correctly. I can't think of other examples, but without restoring our judiciary, but I'm afraid that it will take generations to rebuild trust. So when we manage to rebuild institutions of the judiciary, then we'll be able to start rebuilding trust. So that's, to me, more important than abortion. But what are we? But this is quite a pessimistic perspective, or helpless rather. Well, what can we do now? Now we can show that perhaps you can run a country in a different way. It's possible to be a good MP or a good member of local authorities. Yesterday today, I think one of the internet platforms published a paper on tortures. So I started double checking where it happens, where is it going on, who's responsible, myself or my predecessor. I hope that it would be my predecessor, but it turned out that both of us, well, it doesn't matter because the continuity of institutions is there, and it's very difficult to change prisons. And I wrote a tweet. And I said that I treat this article as a complaint, as a claim, and I will treat it, and so I will deal with it like that. And that was so unexpected by the prison authorities, and they said, well, we should check that. Well, I was convinced for a long time, yes, we'll do it, but then we'll tell you what our control revealed. So when I said, well, I will check it, led to a lot of surprise in the responsible institutions. So I'm thinking what I can do. Well, I can change the world, I can change this area around me, so I can show that you can take seriously what the journalists write. Well, if that's not true, this is but to find it out, I have to check it. So I'm not. I don't want to believe that, well, that's what that will change something. But we can. But we should be active. Well, but whenever we speak about social subjects, I think that the treatment to all these problems is found in education. So my question goes to Dorota, because I think that trust in the judiciary is critical, but without education, without educational institutions, and that will not change overnight, it's hard to think of increasing social resilience or rebuilding trust. And it's not only, I don't mean only youngsters, but also adults. Yes, well, education is the key. This is the slogan that has been used on many occasions, and everybody knows everything about education. Everybody knows how the system should be changed and what it should look like. Yes. Of course, I believe that education is the key. If you want to have resilient society, we need to start from the very beginning. I have more ideas for children and youngsters, teenagers. Adults are more difficult to be reached out, especially in today's world. But what happens today, that is the fact that we will start civic education, not theory, but learning teenagers how to live in a democratic society, how to be an active, committed, engaged citizen. This is a change that I hope will start happening soon. But if we want if we want to have responsible young people involved in the building of our state, we have to take care of their well-being, because without psychological power, and we know what challenges they are facing at school. So if we don't change the atmosphere at school and how we take care of the well-being of these young people, how we care for their mental health, how we teach them to speak about their emotions, to recognize them, and to and how we teach them to be able to ask for help. So because we need people who are mentally strong. But speaking about the trust in politicians, when I was at the Campus Polska, when Krzysztof Izdebski from Watchdog, a person who I'm sure you know, said that he would worry a lot if society had too much trust in politicians, because civic society is for controlling and looking at the hands of politicians. I don't know what you think about it, but I also believe that we have NGOs and civic society not to trust so much. Well, I'm glad I've heard that from you, because this is quite paradoxical. I'd like to give the audience an opportunity to ask questions, but this is a paradox, because we are living under stress, also for geopolitical reasons. That was unmet for at least two decades, two generations. So hence this trust crisis. But on the other hand, unlimited trust is harmful to all of us, to children, to all of us. We can't trust everyone. That's another paradox on the side of those communities which say that they believe in democracy. This is a comma, but in fact it's a colon. We have 13 minutes. We have civic society. Civic society is here with us, and I'm sure that its representatives want to ask questions. So the floor is yours. Yes, I'll moderate as much as I can. There is a lady. I can't see much because of the spotlight.
Tak, żebyśmy się usłyszeli dobrze.
Zofia Grudzińska, of Citizens for Education. I was asked to. I'd like to ask a question.
Reprezentacja oświatowa jest bardzo silna, drodzy Państwo. Przepraszam, Zosiu, że Cię nie poznałem, ale tak...
I'm sorry, I haven't recognized you. Well, there are many people from education. Yes, we are speaking about resilient society, but we've heard a lot, and I'm very happy when I heard about the responsibility and accountability of the governing parties. But if we want to have resilient society, we need to take care of space where society is ready to take over this responsibility. What happened to the standards of the protection of minors? It's good that, according to the law, standards should be shaped at all institutions that work with minors. And what happened? I wrote a text about it in July and August, but in most centers they complained, why should we be doing that? They should give us a model, and in the act there should be the standards, and that's it. So in short, we want to have resilient society. So we want to have a society which can works in line with the principle of subsidiarity, and the government, the parliament, and NGOs should meet and develop tools to help this society, because this society will not become autonomous overnight. We should work on that. This is the question or a request. Well, very good question and good example. I will collect these questions. Konrad, one question to our panelists, whom I heard with a lot of pleasure. Thank you very much. I think that you've shown great courage. You are very intelligent and wise women, and I'd like to thank you very much for being part of this discussion. It's not easy to come here and say that we can't change the world. This takes great courage. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And now, next question, a gentleman from the first row. The mic is yours.
Jestem prawnikiem.
Thank you, Michał Wiesel. I'm a lawyer and speaking about personal resiliency in the context of education. I'd like to tell you that I wasn't taught by anyone but just life. When I look at a member of parliament, mayor and deputy minister, I can see that you have a lot of resiliency. So I've seen you before, for example, but not as politicians before. So how about your resilience? Do you have some special resilience at the posts you occupy? You face hate, not only from political opponents, but you face a hate from the internet, from strangers. No, I need to deal with this only in my occupation, but you're at a much greater risk. But how do you do that in this stressful situation? Thank you very much. I'm a little bit afraid whether we are able to keep time. Let's have another question. Not sure if we have time. Katarzyna Leidel, I'm an advocate. I'd like to speak to the subject of to what Maria Ejchart said about restoring confidence and trust in justice. Ever since you took over and you're in power, I've been thinking about how to restore trust in people who face the justice system, and I'm a little worried that we cannot hear any plans of you in addition to dealing with the so-called neo-judges, which is very difficult due to the president. But what are you planning to do to make the justice system faster and more effective? As we go to court and fight for the rights of our clients, we often feel helpless because the judges don't understand us. They do not have the time to adjudicate wisely. Have you ever thought at the ministry about how to change the mentality of judges? Over the past 8 years have shown that unfortunately judges, there are few judges open to people who come to the court to get justice. Okay, it's a good time to start replying a lot of questions to Maria, but let's start with the local authorities. Okay, let's choose one. Okay, we have about 2 minutes each. Okay, how to transfer responsibility to citizens? I think it should be co-responsibility, co-governance. We need to indeed transfer public tasks to NGOs and groups of citizens wherever possible, but we must never leave them unaided. So we should create some safety nets for teachers and, let's say, schools, never to be left alone, for example, in crisis situations. Example, when a person wielding a knife entering the school, the school director doesn't know what to do, teachers don't know what to do, and so the Department of Education in each city should prepare some safety procedures. I'm not going to address justice system. Now you asked about personal resilience. Very often my friends and strangers ask about how is it to be a mayor and politician, and I got a very serious question in the context of this huge hate from public media in the past, and they asked me whether I had some mental counseling, systemic mental counseling, but there is a barrier of let's say resiliency. Sometimes you take it without any problem, and sometimes it hits you real hard, and then it's difficult. Okay, see how well you've done with the timing. Okay, speaking about resilience, it's impossible to be entirely resilient. I think it will be a big problem when we if we became resilient. It's difficult to remember what has happened over the past year. It's been very intensive, but in January my daughter approached me and said, okay, please stop being minister. This is a price that you pay for doing what I do right now. Now, addressing your question that's about the justice system. Since December 13th, we haven't been dealing with anything else than thinking about how to restore the institution, the justice system, and the trust in the justice system. It's extremely complicated, happening at many levels and requiring various resources. It's not for 1 or 2 or 5 terms. It's also difficult in the context of this conflict that I mentioned before, in addressing the essence of the crisis of the rule of law. As right now, we came up with some proposals of the Ministry of Justice, and now we're facing criticism from our citizens with whom we protested in front of courts with candle watches. It's very stimulating, but it's not a polarization that we are used to. It's polarization within our own community. So we are trying to change it at many levels and restore institutions piece by piece. Great, thank you, Dorothy. Now, indeed, we're exposed to hate, perhaps a little more, being females. We face hate from political opponents, from strangers on the internet, and criticism from our own, let's say, circles, our own communities, because that hurts most. And we need to explain why we failed their trust, and indeed we need to deal with this together, and that builds our strength. Okay, no summary from me. Okay, just I'd like to add that this is a paradox concerning a time and the lack of trust and disappointment. We are talking about the 15th of October, very important date, but the government isn't even 1 year old, because it's been the first time in history that even though the elections were won in October, new cabinet, the new parliament was formed in December. So it's 10 months, and we need to remember about that. Ladies and gentlemen, many thanks. We've had Dorota, Wojda, Ejchart, and and Agata Wojda,
prezydentka Kielc.
mayor of Kielce.
Konrad
So,
Ciesiołkiewicz, starałem się
Konrad
nadganiać,
Ciesiołkiewicz,
jak umiałem. Dziękuję Państwu za przybycie,
trying
za
to do as best I could. Thank you very much for attendance.
Rodzina spółek Pelion to 12 tysięcy osób pracujących w ponad 300 spółkach w Polsce, Szwecji, Wielkiej Brytanii i na Litwie. Jesteśmy liderem w branży ochrony zdrowia. Od 1990 roku dbamy o długość i jakość życia. Pracować z nami możesz w jednym z 7 obszarów.
Uwielbiam szycie w sieci. Wczoraj podszyłem się pod wnuczka, wieczorem uszyłem intrygę na apce randkowej, a dziś planuję grubymi nićmi szyte oszustwo z promocją. Tak się szyje.
Na oszustów są sposoby. Zapoznaj się z poradami ekspertów na niedajsiepodszyć.pl.
Plany biznesowe powstają z marzeń. Dlatego nie ma dwóch takich samych firm. Jedni chcą działać na całym świecie. Innym cały świat mieści się w dłoni. Sukces biznesu to nie tylko jego wielkość, ale też szczęście, jakie przynosi ludziom. PKO Bank Polski.
Polskie Radio.
Jedynka. It's not always easy to recognize. It may look like this. Or like this. It may be a burden, but it is a responsibility that we embrace nonetheless. But if it means this for one person and this for someone else, maybe it ultimately means being there for one another. It isn't handed to us, but we know where to find it and how it feels, how it tastes, and what it sounds like when we finally have it. It means different things to different people, but for many, it means everything. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together.
Radość, nadzieja, życie, wyzwanie, pasja, pamięć, zaufanie, pokój, jedność. Słowa tworzą świat. Polskie Radio. Źródło wiarygodnych informacji. Dziś Nowy Jork, jutro Londyn. Za chwilę Paryż, Warszawa, Berlin. Na całym świecie kultura pulsuje rytmem. Wystarczy tylko włączyć dwójkę. Dwójka, Polskie Radio. Jesteś na miejscu.
Jedzą kanapki z kawiorem.
Nadzwyczajna kasa.
Obrażanie dziennikarzy telewizji polskiej.
Chodzi o działania polityczne.
Przygotowanie ofiar dla pedofilów.
Für Deutschland.
TVP Info. Włącz się na nowo.